Hi, I'm Amy. Thank you for tuning in. As you can see today, I'm not on my own. I'm joined by the author of the YA Book Club pick for January, Catch Your Death, Ravena Guron. Thank you so much for coming on to talk to us. I'm so excited to chat about this book.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to chat as well. Actually, I haven't actually had many opportunities to chat about it yet because it's still very new. So.
It is, and it seems to be everywhere. It's lovely. When I really enjoy a book, I'm rooting for you because, I know you and you're nice. But when I really like a book and I keep seeing it on social media and I'm in shops, I'm like, yes, people should read this book. And it is, I'm not just looking up because you're here, but it's one of the best YA thrillers I've read for ages. So I'm really excited to get into it because I just want to, steal all your ideas and techniques. So no pressure. You just need to communicate all your knowledge in the next 20 to 30 minutes. So a good place to start, I think, I'll just warn people that there may be spoilers in this discussion. It's up to you if you want to give those or not. Ravena, you can be as vague as you like. But the book club, we've already done like a spoilery chat about the book. So just tread carefully if you're watching this and you haven't read the book yet. But for those people who haven't, do you want to give us a little rundown of what it's about, Ravena?
So I'm terrible at doing like a 1-sentence summary for it. I need to come up with that.
Go for it. Do like a full. Feel free to do a full paragraph page. I tend to be say a word and I'm done, but some people like do long. You can say as much as you like, or I can do it. Would you like me to explain what it's about?
Oh no, I'll give it a go because I do need to get used to actually chatting about
go for it.
But basically, it's a YA thriller about these 3 girls who are all strangers to each other. And there's a big snowstorm and they get stuck at this big mansion called the Bramble Estate with this family called the Van Vorte family. And the Van Vorte is a very they're an odd family is a nice way to put it.
That's a polite way of putting it, yeah.
But they're planning this family dinner and they have it in this dining room and there's only 5 of them. And then partway through this dinner, one of them is murdered and it can only be one of the other 4 in the room. So it's a locked room murder mystery. And basically these 3 girls have to solve who the killer is and also survive the night in this isolated mansion that's got no Wi-Fi, it's got no power, there's no way out, basically.
I just nearly said something really cheesy. I was like, that is such a chilling premise. And then I realized it's set at winter. So that's a really bad thing to say. But it's really a really chilling read. I think the locked room thing, the sort of small locked room, and then the large locked room of the house, covered with snow still falling, nobody can get away. It was just so clever and so fun. I loved it. So can you tell us, where did the initial idea come from for this one?
So the initial idea is a massive spoiler. Maybe I won't get into that. But I wanted to write about these 3 girls who everyone underestimates them, and that's basically the premise of the book. Is it's told sort of in flashback. So in the present day, they're having this interview with with the police, and the police are going through saying, "Can you recount what happened that night when you were at the mansion?" And it's sort of they're the last people to be interviewed. And there's a sort of expectation, these are just 3 teenage girls, what will they know? And I wanted to sort of challenge that idea, basically. And then the second inspiration was the big sort of big spoiler. But I think it's pretty obvious if you read the book what I wanted to go with there.
That's really interesting, because I think I've chatted to a lot of people about thriller writing, and sometimes people get a vague idea for a plot and the twists come a lot later, but the twist was kind of something that inspired you. That's really cool, because it is a great twist for anyone who's not read it. So that was when the book club discussed your book. I think the main thing that people were so excited about was the twist, because I was saying to Ravena before we started recording, it's hard for me as somebody who's read so many books and who writes books. I really unpick a book, and sometimes to the detriment of the book, because I just ruin it for myself because I'm trying to solve it all the time. And your twists were amazing. I think that they really took me off guard, surprised me, but also felt like I didn't feel cheated, like you'd pulled the wool over my eyes. Like it was all there in the book, and I was like, oh, should have guessed that. So how do you do that? How do you balance making a twist not so obvious that everyone gets it, but also so completely obscure that people feel cheated? Where's the sweet spot?
I think what I do when I draft is I sort of build out. So I start with the most basic plot, A to B to C, the character introduced, the murder happens, they investigate, the killer's there. There's no red herrings. There's no like anything else. It's really obvious what exactly is going to happen. And then I build outwards and I like layer in additional things. It happens over like a few different drafts, but that's how I like keep track of everything. So I've tried like different methods. I've tried like, you know, writing it out in spreadsheets, and like that hasn't really worked for me. The only way I think I can draft is if I literally see the entire story like before me in a Word document. And then that's how I can keep track of all the like all the twists and stuff, and I can make sure I can go back and I can like layer in additional stuff, and then like focus maybe one twist at a time and keep like thread that all the way through basically.
That is amazing. I might try that, because I've tried the spreadsheet thing and it works for me to do it retrospectively. So to write a chapter outline, spreadsheets work great. But I think that plotting stage, I just don't see it unfolding like you. I think I see the bare bones of the story. So do you find your first drafts are quite short, and then as you kind of add the clues and the red herrings, additional information about characters, that's what bulks it out?
Yeah, I was really alarmed by Catch of Death actually. The first draft was like 52,000 words, which is like, that's slightly under what a young adult thriller would be. But This Book Kills was something like 90, I can't remember exactly, 92,000 words, something like that. It was a lot longer, and I was like, oh no, there's going to be like, I'm going to have one book that's this long, and the next one's going to be like and then I sort of like, when I started adding all the sort of layers and stuff like that, it really like massively bulked it out, because it needed all those sort of like red herrings and twists and things.
And it definitely worked. I think that the layered approach, now I can kind of see it in hindsight, because there are so many nice little clues, and I think the way the characters talk to each other, some of them are really clear and seemingly honest, and then others hold things back. And I thought that was really clever. I had a few suspects, and they tended to be the quieter characters who didn't give much away. So I could see as a writer, it was just beautifully crafted. Like, you'd obviously put so much into that mystery. So were there any other authors that have inspired you, or TV shows or movies? Is there anything that you think you've kind of learned that from?
So I've said it so many times, I could be a spokesperson for Agatha Christie, but
do it.
Agatha Christie, specifically her book Cards on the Table, and basically she'd got a lot of like criticism from like critics, obviously, that she sort of relied on like really out there twists, like a gong being placed at a certain angle and that like going off. And so she was just like, you know, I'm going to prove all my critics wrong. I'm going to write a simple locked room murder mystery where there's only 4 suspects, and the murderer will be one of these 4 suspects, but you're still going to be massively surprised. And I remember reading it thinking, of course I'm not going to be surprised. Like, I know it's one of these 4 people. Like, how could I be surprised? And then obviously I was. And I thought that was really great, that really simple idea. And I always say, like, she was probably the person who invented like the locked room murder mystery as we know it now. And that's what I wanted to do as well. I wanted to write that very simple, like, literally a locked room. There is no way in or out. There's nowhere else it could be. It's going to be these 4 suspects. And it was a really nice murder mystery to write, because I think that I'm writing another book. I'm writing my 3rd YA thriller. I just handed in the draft a couple of weeks ago. And that's not a locked room murder mystery. And I'm seeing how nice it was to write one, because it's so simple, and yet we have this big book that came out of it, you know.
You make it look simple, but I think I always find books that are the easiest to read, like this is just so Moorish, and you want to read another chapter, and then you've just eaten your whole night up, because of how you write really flows. And I think, like you said, the way you layered everything up, it just came together. Like Agatha Christie, I think her books even now are so accessible and like easy to read, but they're so complex in a lot of ways. And like you said, difficult to predict. How often I don't know, I can't always predict an Agatha Christie book. I need to read more. Every time I talk to an author I admire, they seem to mention Agatha Christie at the moment. I'm like, something's telling me, because I interviewed William Hussey at Yale before Christmas, and he was saying how he's really inspired by Agatha Christie as well. And he really liked one called, I'm going to get this title, I'm going to do this every time, Announcing a Murder, I think it's called, or A Murder Announced, or something like that. Yeah, that's the one where they announce a murder in the paper, and then people turn up, as you do, to see what happens. I think you or I maybe would. I don't know, like with the curious author in you, are you somebody who does like to kind of do creepy things and go to creepy places, or?
Absolutely not.
So you like to write them and scare us, but you wouldn't put yourself in that situation?
I can write it when I'm safe, but like That's what I like about like a cozy crime, is that there's something really comforting about like this type of book, in that like obviously you don't know who the murderer is going to be at the end, but you know that there's going to be a solution, and you know the murderer is going to be like captured and put away. And I find that really comforting, and I think that's why a lot of people like this sort of genre. That's why it's, you know, it's cozy crime, there is murder in it, but that cozy feeling of it's all going to be okay in the end. So
It's
yeah,
like
it's
doing a really
to,
fun complex jigsaw, isn't it? You know that all the
yeah.
pieces are there and the author will have presented you with it, but you've got to try and figure it out before it gets revealed to you, which, as I said, I was rubbish in this one. So as well as the twist, I think another popular element of this book was the atmosphere and the setting. People were absolutely obsessed with this kind of oppressive room and then house and the snowstorm. How did you go about describing that and kind of creating that really suffocating atmosphere?
So first draft, basically almost a white space. It was almost
Zero
like,
atmosphere.
yeah, literally just like the characters are there, and you know, the side characters didn't really have that much personality and stuff. That's something that came sort of like built in through the layers of the like further drafts. That sense of, I just had it like this visual in my head of what like this house would look like, and all the snow there and everything. And then I just really love that idea, and I did it with This Book Kills as well, of really like dark rooms, and sort of like you don't know what's going to be in the next room, and all there's like, you've got your light but there's like shadows in the corner of the room. I just love that sort of like atmosphere.
I think the secret passageways really added to that as well. And without giving too much away, once you realise that the secret passageways running through the house, it just felt so much less safe for the characters as well, because you don't know where anybody could be. You think they're in that room, but actually there were secret passageways everywhere, so no holds barred. And I think I loved the fact that you used all like different tropes that I absolutely love, like the locked room, secret passages, big creepy house, you know, kind of unlikable-ish creepy family that live there. I thought that was great. And as well as the setting, I think that the characters, like the interplay between them was really interesting too, like the minor ones, but also the three girls who'd come in from outside. Was that very deliberate to you, that they were your three narrators? You always, I think, as you said earlier, you always wanted them to be like the outside the family environment.
Yeah, I think like in my head I knew exactly what kind of characters they were going to be. Like Jane would be like quite really quiet and really reserved, and she wouldn't think too much. So like her point of view chapters would be really like quite short and quite sparse on detail and stuff. And then the character Davy, she was just like really snarky. She's that sort of character that just is really fun to write, because she's the kind of character who's like, you know, I'm not scared of anything. I'm going to go and I'll look down the secret passageway and no one's going to get me. And then you had like Lizzie, and she was like the flip of that. She was like this really like terrified, scared person, and I could just like see her in my like mind's eye. She's just very like, she's how I would be if I was in that atmosphere. I was just like, I wouldn't want to like break any rules. I wouldn't want to investigate anything. I'd be like, okay, like I'm going to stay in my room. And she's sort of forced out to investigate by the fact that obviously there's a killer on the loose. So I could see all three of them like very, very clearly in my mind, which really helped keep their point of views like distinct and separate.
Yeah, the way I read now generally is quite fragmented. I just have to grab a few minutes whenever I can, and I often come back in the middle of a chapter. And I found that with your writing, I could really tell which narrator I was dealing with. And I think three different narrators is so hard to manage, to make the voices sound different. Were they the main things you did, that you thought about those individual character traits and kind of let that filter in the way you wrote them?
Yeah, so like it is a big, but there's a lot going on. There's like the 3 point of views, and then obviously there's also like all the other characters as well. And I just had to, like, when I was writing that first draft, I had to focus on the one thing. And then there were people who would throw out different advice, and like I read something and someone said, okay, when you're writing like 3 point of views, like write the entire book from one point of view and like intersperse the other chapters. And I was like, I can't do that. I had to flip between them. But yeah, like I think that was the most complicated, because I'd never written 3 point of view before, because obviously This Book Kills, it was like very one point of view, like I could follow all the way through. So it was quicker in a way to write, because I wasn't jumping between. So it was a bit of a challenge, but it was also, I think it was quite satisfying. Actually, it was really nice to go between and sort of their different positions in the house and find, you know, what are they up to, basically.
Yeah, it was really clever because it gave, if they'd just been together and it had been like a third person narrative or something, it wouldn't have given you those different angles of the house and different viewpoints. And like you said, if the main character was Lizzie, like there would have been no kind of forward drive and agency. Like she, for quite a lot of the book, it took a while to come out of herself, didn't it, and kind of find her drive. And she got a lot of that from Davy. So I thought that the three characters worked really nicely together. And I think in terms of their voice and their traits, it was just a really great combo, like the three girls. And when the book club got together, we all said which ones we either related to or really liked. And there was just a spread. It wasn't like one character, everybody loved Davy or everybody loved Lizzie or Jane. It was really spread out. And I thought how great for teenage girls to read a book about kind of female empowerment and not, you know, taking teenage girls for granted. And kind of thinking that they'll be weak or not be able to solve a murder mystery, and then having these three really different girls to relate to. So I think that was another thing that I really liked. Like there was just so much to this book. It kind of had a lot of depth and a lot of things to think about. I think teenagers will get a lot out of it, which is great. I like a teaching moment. I used to be a teacher. I like things that have got like learning through them as well. So one thing I wanted to ask you, I always kind of have a silly question. We'll get to that in a minute. But I wanted to ask you about your writing process, because somebody said to me that they'd seen another interview with you and that you, I tend to spread my writing out and write a little bit every day. But I know that you work a day job. So how do you fit your writing in? What does it look like to get to the end of a 90,000 word novel? How do you do it?
So I'm currently writing the third book of my Fairy File series at the moment, so my middle grade fantasy. So I'm drafting, like, as we speak, I'm in the middle of the draft. I'm like 20,000 words in. And basically, I just set myself at like a word count target. So like I have to write 2,000 words a day during the week, and then it'll be 5,000 words on the weekend. And I'll say to myself, I can draft very quickly because I'm the type of writer who can say, okay, I can turn off the voice in my head that says like this is crap, basically, a crap draft. Nicer way of putting it. But basically what I'll do is I'll just think, okay, I've got to get the words down. And if I realize that, oh, this plot isn't quite making sense, even though I've outlined, I will outline. I have a chapter by chapter outline that I have before I start plotting and before I start drafting. So I wouldn't say I'm a pantser, but I'll start drafting and then I realize, oh, the thing that I've outlined doesn't really work. And I know other writers would like stop and they would go back and they would like fix things, but I just like square bracket, say this is what needs to change, and then I'll carry on drafting as if I've made that change previously. So basically I end up with, I wouldn't even call it first draft, it's like a draft zero that I've just written insanely quickly. But I think it goes back to what I said before, I can't see the story until it's like entirely on the page. So I can't worry about like filling in those square brackets because it just needs to be on the page before I can even like properly do any editing work. And it's painful, which is why I just want to get it done as quickly as possible to get to the edits, basically. So
do you enjoy the editing part of the process more?
I wouldn't say that. I always hate the part of the process that I'm in. So when I'm in the edit,
familiar actually.
I really miss drafting because like you can be really free when you're drafting, and it doesn't really matter. Like you can think, okay, I'm going to fix everything later. But obviously when you're editing, you have that really like satisfying, like, oh, it's all coming together again. So there's different like pros and cons to it, but I can't be the type of writer that writes a first draft and it's a very good first draft. You know, like that's just not, because I don't see the story until it's there on the page. No matter how much I want to plot it out and say, okay, like this is exactly what happens in each chapter, I won't see what's wrong with it until it's there before me and I'm realizing, oh crap, there's a massive plot hole here.
I'm exactly the same. I've tried to plot, but I normally get about halfway through a plotting document and go, I don't know what happens now. I just see a complete blank space and I have to start writing and the characters have to start taking shape and the plot, and then it starts to snowball for me and I can go back to my plotting document then. But I do get to a point generally where I just get stuck and I have to start writing. Do you follow a particular method of plotting, or do you just kind of like mark out the beats? Because I've just reread Save the Cat Writes a Novel and I'm going to try plotting the next thing with this. And I've never used it before. I have read it in the past, but kind of thought in the past plotting isn't for me, but I'm wondering if maybe I should give it another go.
So I used to try to use like beat sheets. Like I think Save the Cat has a beat sheet, and I think
it does. Yeah,
that for my fantasy books. But I think I do like a version of the snowflake method, which is where you start with like your pitch, and then it's like a 1-sentence pitch, and then you expand that into a paragraph, and then you expand that into a synopsis for a page, and then you take that synopsis and you make like a chapter by chapter outline, basically just expanding. And then my draft 0 is basically almost like an extensive outline. Basically, I just keep expanding, and then that's how I end up with something to work with, basically. But my process actually changes like book to book, so that has worked for me very well on like some of my middle grade fantasies. And it worked really well for This Book Kills, and it didn't work well for Catch Your Death, and it didn't work well for my third thriller either, because I know the books were different. Like, especially I think with Catch Your Death with the 3-point of view, like, because I was jumping around like with a different point of view, it just didn't work to have the like chapter by chapter outline jumping around between the characters. And I can't really Catch Your Death, right? It was a blur, actually. I might have blocked it out, because I think I remember complaining afterwards saying, oh wow, this is really, really difficult to write. Yeah, that was just, I had the very, very, basically the long outline, the 52,000 word draft 0. That I think I did almost what you mentioned before. I reverse outline. Then I went back with that draft and went to a Word document and wrote, this is what happens in each chapter, and this is what I think should happen, basically. So yeah, the process was different.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, that does seem to be the method with a lot of people. And yet I find it so amazing. Like, I know Melissa Walliver writes a really detailed, like tens of thousands of words outline, and then literally writes that, and that generally is her book with a few surprises. And at the end of the day, we all get to that same book at the end, and I find that so interesting that there are parts that are painful and parts that are stressful, but like we all kind of get through it. And it sounds to me like it's the layered approach for you, like a layered approach to plotting and then to actually writing and editing. And one thing I wanted to ask you about as well before we get to the silly question at the end is that you have created so much variety in your career already. You're obviously, your middle grades are more fantasy, is that right? Because I've not got a chance to read those yet. And then obviously your thrillers have been so different, like This Book Kills to Catch Your Death. I think that you can tell that they're you, but they're very different at the same time. Do you consciously try to kind of reinvent, or does a new idea just strike you and you go with it?
No, I think it's more like the new ideas will come to me. I think in my head, like obviously This Book Kills and Catch Your Death, they're obviously 2 standalones, but they deal with the same sorts of like themes of like privilege. For example, Catch Your Death sort of builds on those like themes I introduced in This Book Kills. In my mind, like that's what connects them together. That and they deal with quite dark themes. I think Catch Death especially, but they also like have those really like lighthearted, witty, funny moments as well. And I think that's the same thing with my like middle grade fantasy. I've always been drawn to like narrators with a bit of like snark about them, like a bit of wit. And those narrators, but you're almost like, oh, are you a nice person? But it doesn't really matter if they're a nice person, as long as they're like interesting. And my middle grade especially, the character's an anti-hero. Like she is the book. She's not a good person in the first book there. And I think that's what connects all my books together, those sort of like those themes of a bit of darkness in them. And I think with a bit of wit, I think that's the sort of books that I want to keep trying to write, no matter what the ideas are themselves, even if they are quite different.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you are drawn to the darker things, but I think you do it in such a kind of light, I don't know how to say it, like a really sensitive way. Like you deal with really difficult issues, like really kindly, and still manage to write a really fun book too. Because I think that sometimes a book can become all about issues, but you just seem to have this really great balance of like fast pace and, like you said, gentler, nicer, fun moments, but then with a really deep underpinning, which is amazing, I think, because why thrillers get a bad rep. Sometimes when I say people to people that write YA, they're like, oh, when are you gonna like move on to adult books? But I think that's when I present them with YA books like this and say, like, this is a masterclass in writing a totally plot mystery. So all the things you've talked about and all the stress and like the layering things up, it's worked. Because, you know, like I said, the book club loved it. So to kind of wrap up the discussion, I'll ask you the final questions about books you recommend, what you're working on. But I want to know, if you were in a murder mystery, what characters from other books, I mean, you can take some from your books, take some from other people's, who would you take with you to make sure that you survived and solved the mystery?
So very obviously, Poirot.
Yes, I mean, that's a pretty good choice.
He's going to get me there. He will solve that mystery.
Will he keep you safe, though? I feel like you might need some muscle on your team as well, just to make sure.
But I would like, what's his name? The detective in Knives Out, Benoit Blanc. Am I saying it wrong?
I haven't seen it, and people keep talking about it. In relation to your book, so many people said Knives Out in the chat, and I was like, I need to watch Knives Out. I have a 3-year-old. I've like, my TV watching and movies has just gone down drastically in the past nearly 4 years. So yeah, I do need to watch that. That's definitely on the list.
He comes across as quite incompetent, but he's not. But I think that'd be quite funny actually with Poirot there. And then if we're talking about like brute strength, probably like a Marvel character. Let's get Spider-Man in there, you know.
I just went to Aquaman because I think Jason Momoa's really hot, and I was like, he could be the muscle, and also like you could just enjoy him being there as well. I'll add him to that team for you if no, that would just round the team out nicely. Would you take any of your teenage girl characters, or do you just want to like keep them safe and protect them from this?
No, let's stick Davy in there. Let's stick Jess from This Book Kills. They'd all do a good job, I think.
I think Davy would be amazing. Can you imagine Davy and Poirot together? Like, she would drive him absolutely mad, but I think by the end he'd have like a begrudging respect for her. Like, okay, yeah, you did like solve the mystery a step before me. And that's a real message, isn't it? That these teenage girls have power and they are great, and you underestimate them at your peril. Good answers, thank you. So a couple of more things and then we will wrap this up. Can you recommend any other books for people who love yours?
So this is going to sound like an odd one. It makes sense. So The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. It's a YA sort of fantasy thriller. Like a horror thriller type. It's like supernatural thriller, that's what it is. So obviously my books don't have a supernatural element and it's more focused on the thriller, but there is like this amazing mystery in it, and it's also very like also about these teenage girls, and also just like they're young women. They're like, again, it's about like giving them the power basically, and it's just a really like, it's more horror than I write. But it's amazing. I really recommend it. I don't think it's out yet.
Yeah, I've pre-ordered it.
Weeks.
Yeah, I think so. I'm waiting patiently for my Waterstones special edition pre-order. Yeah, I keep hearing amazing things about that. I loved House of Hollow, so I've been really anticipating that one. Yeah, that's a good recommendation. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to recommend before we wrap this up?
And then I always did like Tess James Mackey's like YA thrillers. They're just put characters in some weird places and then scary stuff happens basically. So You Wouldn't Catch Me Dead's just come out. It's about these kids that go camping, it all goes horribly wrong, and she's just really focused on like really fast paced, like, oh, what's going to happen next, just keep turning the pages basically, and they're just like really, really fun books. And then Gina Blaxall's last book, I think it's called Love You to Death.
Yeah, I've got it on my shelf somewhere. I'm just like, oh yeah, it's right here. That never happens. There you go. I've got it. I haven't read it yet. This one. Yeah. We think we should read this one.
Gina's also a big Agatha Christie fan as well, and she really like her mysteries are always like really satisfying. Like there's two different types of mysteries. There's the kind of mysteries where you're sort of reading them, and then the fun in reading them is you're not trying to solve anything. The author's going to make the murderer someone you barely know, but that's not the point of like reading it. It's more of that sort of like turning the page, not about solving. Whereas the other type of mysteries are like the characters there, and it's definitely going to be someone you know, so you're more likely to be able to guess who it was, because it's definitely someone you know well, but there's something really satisfying about like having that all there so you can actually try to solve it yourself. And that's what Gina's books do really, really well. So, and it's got like a really nice like feminist sort of undertone as well. So yeah, I do recommend that one as well.
Yeah, I read the one before. Was that You Can Trust Me? Can't Trust Me? That again was really feminist, and the mystery was really, really compelling and so creepy. Like, I think I'm just trying to think if there was one of the deaths in particular that like I found really shocking and scary, and I love that in a thriller. If something as an adult kind of really strikes me as moving, then I think it's really great. So can you talk about what you're working on? You're working on your middle grade one, did you say? Is that your current focus?
Yeah, so I'm currently like at a stage where I'm drafting 2 different things. So I just finished drafting my third YA thriller. It'll be out next January. So literally just sent off the first draft like 2 weeks ago, and now yes, I am drafting my third middle grade fantasy. It's not The Thief of Farafel 3. It's the third book in the Farafel series, and it will be out May 2025. But we've got the Farafel 2 still to come in May 2024. So
oh gosh,
it's lots of drafting at the moment.
Yeah. Basically. So are you on a constant cycle of you're drafting something and then you finish that and then the edits come back of the other thing and just on repeat?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
That sounds familiar. I did a lot of that last year. And like when I was working on the anthology between the Mina books and stuff, it's tricky. Do you find that it's quite hard to manage, or have you got into like a rhythm with it now?
I actually did say to my editors once, because they're 2 different publishers, and I said to them, it's like you have some sort of like telepathic link to each other where you'll both send me something at the exact same time. And I know like the deadlines will be completely different. Obviously the publication dates are, way off each other, but I always find it really funny that if one has sent me something, the other one is going to a couple of days later. It's like an editor, like, yeah, telepathic link. They know.
I think publishing is a hive mind. Like I remember I interviewed Kendara Blake and she said that she was just having the first break she'd had in like 3 years. And she's like, right, I'm going to take a few months and actually not write anything. And then she got an email that said, do you want to write the next Buffy book and start straight away? And she was like, oh my God, universe, like hand me the book I want to write more than any other book, but in my first holiday for years. It's quite amazing, I think, that publishing, we were saying before we went live, it seems to go at 1,000 miles an hour or just a glacial pace that you can barely see, and it can be pressured, can't it? But it's amazing at the same time. Like we talked about this before, like it's really exciting that we get to do this and people want to read the stuff we've written.
Well, I think we're very lucky. I think, yeah, it's always, yeah, can't express that enough.
No, exactly. And that's a nice note to end. We feel so lucky. We've been doing our day jobs or parenting during today, so I feel like I've taken enough of your time. I really appreciate you coming on, Ravena. It's been so lovely to chat to you again. I hope we'll be able to do an event together at some point this year. Our paths crossed a couple of times last year, didn't they, towards the end? Yeah, so that was the January Book Club read. I managed to talk, obviously, to lovely author, and Ravena signed some book plates, which are already on their way to people. So hopefully when your next YA thriller comes out, maybe that can be another one we can add to our list. So that was next January, is it? Awesome. Thank you so much, Ravena. Thank you to everyone who was watching, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.